Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Breaking news. CNN has learned that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who launched and has overseen Robert Mueller's Russia investigation for more than a year now, will leave the Justice Department in the coming weeks after a new Attorney General is confirmed. Joining us now to talk about this and so much more is former Democratic vice presidential candidate and Senator Tim Kaine. Good morning, Senator.
Hey, Allison, good to be with you.
Rod Rosenstein has shepherded the Mueller investigation. What is your feeling as you wake up to this news that he'll soon be departing?
Well, that news causes me great concern, Allison. You're right. Shepherded, I would say he's allowed and protected the investigation to go forward, which it needs to. His announcement that he plans to step down once the AG is confirmed is going to really raise the stakes for the hearing in the Judiciary Committee on the nomination of William Barr to be AG, because as you've also reported, William Barr was sending freelance memos to the Trump administration, making a case to undercut the Mueller investigation. So the deep concern will be, if he comes in and Rosenstein is gone, is this just a preface to either undercutting the investigation or trying to keep the results of it hidden from the American public?
Let's talk.
Yeah, and that's the part that is interesting. Okay, so Rosenstein announced today that he is going to be leaving. He is the Deputy Attorney General, and he's in charge of Mueller. He supervises Mueller because Jeff Sessions, who was our Attorney General, another racist, recused himself because he's got dirty hands when it comes to Russia. Okay, he had meetings that he did not disclose, private meetings, with Kislyak, Ambassador Kislyak, in his Senate office that he did not disclose. And, of course, he was on the campaign, and he was running the foreign policy shop that hired George Papadopoulos and Carter Page and all these, miscreants. Okay, so he had to recuse himself, and therefore the acting attorney, the deputy, had to make the call about whether or not there was enough there to appoint an independent counsel or a special counsel. We don't have an independent anymore. An independent would be picked by Congress, okay? That's the difference. So he looked at it after the Comey firing, and he said there's enough here to require an investigation of collusion, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. So Rod Rosenstein is the person who selected Bob Mueller, which everybody, regardless of party at the time, said was a great choice. He was a Marine, and he was the FBI director to a Republican president and kept held over for the Obama administration. That's how good he is, and that's how not political he is, and he never leaks, and he's just an upright, upstanding American guy. Everybody loved him, okay? Now, all of a sudden, the Russians are helping to denigrate Robert Mueller. I don't know if you know this, but a lot of the stuff that the Russians did during the campaign, it's still going on. And they're the ones that, they pretend to be Americans, and they're on Facebook, and they're on Instagram, and they're on Twitter, the bots, and the, people with, these 3 followers, 6, whatever they are, right? And they're the ones that are saying Mueller is compromised, and Mueller once, defended Islam. All this stuff that they now know is, hot button stuff for the white supremacists in the United States. Anyway, so they're still doing it, trying to denigrate Mueller. Well, if Rosenstein leaves, right now we have an acting attorney general because everybody's out. No, we have no government. We have no one. We don't have a secretary of defense. We don't have a chief of staff at the Pentagon. All forced out. No one can be recruited to work for this president except this Bill Barr dude. Okay? His confirmation hearings start next week. I think it'll last 2 days, the 15th and the 16th. And that's all anybody's going to be talking about. You watch, you wait. And it's important because Bob Barr has previously been in that office. And now, since he's, retiring and getting older, I guess he figures he made all his money and he can, help the president do something with the Mueller investigation. The fact that Rosenstein said today that if Barr is confirmed and once he's placed into the office of Attorney General, he will leave, which means if Bob Barr, if his hearings are next week, okay, that takes it to the middle of January, and then it'll take, a couple weeks to get a vote, and then let's say he's confirmed, and then a transition occurs, figure February, beginning, middle February, is when this man would become the Attorney General of the United States, and Rosenstein will leave. Because Rod Rosenstein knows exactly what Mueller has to sign off on subpoenas, has to sign off on document production, has to sign off on Mueller opening up an inquiry over here, or Mueller opening up an inquiry over there, or, doing some sort of a plea deal over it. Rosenstein supervises Bob Mueller. The fact that Rosenstein is saying that he could now leave tells me he knows that Mueller is pretty much done. Now, last week, Mueller asked for a 6-month extension for the grand jury. Doesn't mean that it will last another 6 months, just means that the grand jury authorization had expired and he wasn't done yet, which means more indictments like Roger Stone, Jerome Corsi, for instance. These are people that have said that they expect to be indicted. So maybe Mueller needs, a couple more weeks or so, maybe even a month, not necessarily the whole 6 months. And the grand jury had to be renewed. So that happened. But I think the biggest problem we might have is not that Bob Barr will be in a position to fire Mueller, because this thing is so far and, it's so developed that it wouldn't pass muster. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I think even Lindsey Graham would have a cow. Everyone on the Senate Intelligence Committee, including, what's his name, from North Carolina, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, what's his name? Barr. Senator Barr, he's a Republican from North Carolina. He knows there's there. I think he would have a cow. If, this guy comes in, gets confirmed, they're going to ask him, you watch, they're going to ask him whether or not he would recuse himself from all things Russia. He probably has to give them assurances that he will in order to get the votes for confirmation. And then he comes in and he fires Mueller. I just don't see that is the way. What I think he'll agree to is to recuse himself from the Mueller investigation, which means what we really have to pay attention to is not just the confirmation hearings for our next Attorney General, which is a very important position in charge of the entire justice system, but who the Deputy Attorney General is. Because the deputy would then be the new Rosenstein. The deputy would be the person in charge of making sure that Mueller can continue his work, number one, until he feels he's concluded, Mueller does. And two, we now have to worry about the release of the Mueller report, no matter what it finds, because Mueller was not appointed by Congress. He was appointed by the acting Attorney General, or the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. That means Mueller's report goes to that person. Mueller's report would go to the Attorney General if he doesn't recuse himself from the Russia investigation, or the deputy if Bob Barr has to give assurances to Congress to get confirmed. And that's why we have to pay special attention to who the Deputy Attorney General is going to be. So that's the first issue. So you could be smarter than anybody else, okay? The second issue is no matter who is in charge, whether or not, it's Barr or a deputy, they're going to get the report. Whether or not they release the report to Congress, Whether or not they make the report public is their decision, whoever that person is, whether it's the AG or the deputy. And that is why I think Mueller has no choice at this point but to indict the president. Why do I keep saying that? Because the indictment would be released to the court, it would be a public document, and we would get to see it. And there would be no question about Bob Barr wanting to release it or the deputy wanting to give it to Congress. No, it would be there. And we would see it, just like we saw the indictment of Veselnitskaya, because that was, SDNY, but it's still federal, and it went to the court, and we saw the indictment. Same thing with, Papadopoulos and Mueller. Same thing with the 23 Russians that he indicted. I mean, that was the most informative indictment of all of them so far, only because it showed what the Russians did. And now that you know how they knew who to target, a la the Manafort story yesterday, it's all becoming a clear picture. And that clear picture is a conspiracy between a Trump campaign, Trump's son, Trump's son-in-law, Flynn, Kushner, Manafort. And remember, we haven't heard from Rick Gates. He's cooperating. We haven't heard from him. We know that there was a second meeting with Russians that, what was his name? George Nadler, I think his name was, the Lebanese businessman, and then the Seychelles meeting also with Eric Prince. There are a lot of loose ends out there. So there are more indictments as long as we keep getting these speaking indictments, as they refer to them, because Mueller's team writes beautiful, plain English that I can understand. And if you spend a few minutes with these speaking indictments and you lay them all out in front of each other, you start to see the conspiracy. You start to see what the motivation was for a guy like Manafort, what the motivation was and is for a guy like Carter Page, what the motivation is for a guy like Papadopoulos, what the motivation for a Michael Flynn might have been. We don't know what Rick Gates knows, but he was Manafort's business partner for many years. Manafort, Gates, they were together. We know Manafort had a lobby shop with Roger Stone for years and years. So all these people are connected, and these indictments connect them to Russian activities. So that report's going to be everything. And unless we can trust the new Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General to make it public, Mueller's going to have to write a speaking indictment of Trump.
We just learned yesterday, because of inadvertently unredacted court filing, that Paul Manafort, then the president's campaign chair, delivered Trump campaign polling to someone connected to Russian intelligence. Were you aware of that? And does that contact between a Trump campaign official and Russian intelligence, does that constitute a form of collusion?
No, it doesn't. And we're going to get to the rest of the information on it. More of that will come out. Obviously, that was redacted previously, and then that it was actually put out yesterday. This is an ongoing relationship that Paul Manafort had with Ukraine. He was a representative of Ukraine, worked for the Ukrainian government, and was trying to be able to work for a peace proposal, which, by the way, I did not support what he was doing and don't think what he was doing was appropriate. But he had Ukrainian clients. This was a Ukrainian client. Now, this person also previously worked for the Russian military, but so did most everybody in that. So I don't see this as a deliberate contact with the Russian government.
What?
This was a person that he'd worked with for a decade and a half at that point in Ukraine. And so we need to get the whole story on it because it makes it sound like this is some secret back channel communication with it. If it was, this was someone that Paul Manafort had known for a very long time and trusted.
But according to prosecutors, had connections to Russian intelligence.
Well, I think he knew he had connections to the Russian government, but communicating with someone about polling data and what's going is no secret thing in that sense. So I'm, again, looking for that as the smoking gun, I think would be a pretty big stretch.
That's James Lankford, a Republican senator who was on the Senate Intelligence Committee and knows what happened. And he's making excuses for Paul Manafort handing over to Konstantin Kilimnik internal polling data to a Russian intelligence. Well, they're all Russian intelligence over there. I mean, everybody in Russia is a former Russian intelligence. Let me explain to you. This is what you would call a 5-alarm fire if you were looking for a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian intelligence operatives.
Paul Manafort handed over polling data. Paul Manafort was the campaign chair for the Trump campaign. Handed over internal polling data to someone known to be connected to Russian intelligence. Dana, you're going, covered a lot of campaigns.
Yeah.
If you hear the campaign chair sharing internal data with someone connected to the intelligence services of another country, that's unusual.
Yes. I mean, that's an understatement. I heard Senator Lankford on with you last hour, diminishing it. He's a member of the Intelligence Committee. That actually surprised me because he's on these issues and a lot of issues, he's not a partisan player when it comes to particularly national security. And this is a 5-alarm fire when it comes to national security and counterintelligence. For the campaign chair, whether he had power or not, that was his title, of a major party candidate to meet with somebody who is a known operative, high-ranking operative in Russian intelligence. Let's just say that they just met and did nothing but had coffee, as far as we know. That would be a big deal. But then to hand over internal polling data, there's so many questions that raises. None of the answers is good.
And I have to tell you, I mean, it's so amazing because there were emails between Manafort and Oleg Deripaska, going to Konstantin Kilimnik to deliver a message to Oleg Deripaska, who's suing him for money for a media campaign that he doesn't produce or hadn't produced to date. And he's saying, listen, I'm doing it. Has he seen the newspapers? Has he seen the reporting? Is he watching this campaign? Ask him, what do I have to do to make myself whole with him? Tell him I will give him private briefings. This is insanity. This is crazy pants time. This is off the hook. Now, again, remember, there's a mystery company that's still, being held in contempt of court. There's a mystery company in a mystery country that everybody believes is a bank that has been subpoenaed for records by Mueller. And when the court ruled that this company is not protected because they have a branch apparently here in the United States, which is where the subpoena was served, and they have a commercial interest in the United States. They do commercial business in the United States, which then takes the shield off of them. That exposed them to document production requests. Well, yesterday, the court ruled, remember they appealed and they wanted an en-banc decision. The court ruled that they are in contempt. They do have to produce these bank documents. Well, we don't know if it's a bank, but I'm assuming it's a bank. They do have to produce documents, and they are being fined $50,000 a day, every day, that they do not turn over records. So we don't know who this company is still, although some reporters are saying it is a bank. They know that much. This portion of it has to do with money laundering and payments. Jim Lankford, while he, according to Dana Bash, who covers Congress very well, says he's usually not partisan when it comes to issues of national security, I think is compromised. I must tell you that I think a good chunk of the Republican senators, the Republican Party, is compromised. How? Well, the NRA brought a lot of these legislators over to Russia through these throwdown parties with lots of vodka that they said was off the hook crazy. There obviously there's tapes, there's obviously behavior, there's obviously drunk behavior, and there's obviously money that was laundered through the NRA into various Republican senators, Congress members, and the Trump campaign. I have a funny feeling that they all know that they took this money. I think they all know that the NRA is compromised by big Russian money, like $30 million worth. And either they don't want to give it back or they don't want to admit that they knew. And if they gave it back, they would have to admit that they knew. And when they talk about, Mitch McConnell's afraid of being primaried, remember who primaries you. It's people and donors with lots and lots of money, like the NRA. They would run the ads to primary you. They would pick the next candidate, right? They would be the ones. If Mitch McConnell is really scared of being primaried, that would surprise me, that this is the reason why he's literally not passing bills to open the government that he was for 11 days ago. Bills that his Senate voted for 11 days ago. Funding for the government 11 days ago. Now all of a sudden he's holding all that hostage because it gives the president a chance to talk about the wall and build up the base again. And he's got dirty hands. And his wife is a cabinet member, and maybe she knows a couple of things that she shouldn't know. It's a very sick situation. This president is dangerous.
Yeah, Josh, I mean, I want to get back to what Dan was saying about Senator Langford. He said this is not the smoking gun of collusion. You're the expert in smoking gun investigations. How do you see this?
You know, I actually wrote down that phrase when I was listening to his interview because it made my eyes widen.
Really?
In investigations, there is rarely a smoking gun. You have different clues that you try to assemble in order to paint a picture, to describe what happened, to tell a story. Rarely do you have Richard Nixon on the tape, you know, trying to obstruct an investigation. It's more nuanced than that. And so I think the senator knows that. I'm also confused as to why he's trying to diminish this. But the American people have to understand this is a major deal to have a president's campaign manager colluding, and I'll say that word. I don't know if it's illegal what he did. That's yet to be seen, but at least colluding with a person that he knows is tied to a foreign intelligence service is just incredible.
See, and what you're left with here, when you hear former FBI agents like, Josh over there, when you hear them say, that made my eyes wide, and this is not we're following clues and everything. Yes, those clues are going to be banking records and documents and emails and phone records and blocked phone numbers and phone calls to blocked phone numbers, right? Which Mueller all had. And that is what's building the picture. But when he says, well, we don't know why James Langford is saying stuff like that, it lets people who like me, who really pay attention, and you, because we are the front line here. We're the people who choose to be informed. We're the people that are going to be called on first to explain it to others who might be on the fence to save this country. There's no question. That's what we do. That's what we're doing. So people like us are left to wonder why James Langford says this isn't a big deal. And the only answer is because he's part of this deal. However small, could be just the NRA money, could be a trip to Russia he took. God only knows. All right, Michael in California.
Hi, Randy.
Hey, Michael.
There's a lot of stuff you've covered today, but one thing, Jill Stein, when Flynn was in Moscow having dinner with Putin, who was sitting right there? Jill Stein.
Right.
And she made a difference in a lot of key states as to how this election turned out.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's one thing I wish more people would pay attention to.
Well, she didn't. I mean, are you saying that she did something wrong by running as a Green Party candidate?
Well, I'm just, because she was there in Moscow, I'm concerned about her motives in running and her backing, backing from Russia.
Oh, like who gave her money?
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
It would be interesting to see. I don't know that she had that much money, but that, look, the idea that Russia was looking at Flynn for Trump and Jill Stein to peel off votes from Hillary Clinton, that's what that photo shows. That was a strategy that Putin was engaged in.
Okay. one of the things that worries me most about what's going on now with Trump is the corner he's boxing himself into. And it's becoming more dangerous as we go along.
If he could box the United States in as tightly as he boxed himself in, we wouldn't need a stinking wall, that's for sure.
Well, it's hard to imagine an end game on this at this point. It really is.
Right. I mean, the end game is going to be, the Mueller report, and that's going to put a period at the end of the sentence of this, presidency, one way or another. One way or another. And either Donald Trump, it's bizarre to think that 87 contacts between his campaign and Russians is going to produce no collusion, no conspiracy, no fraud. That to me is just impossible to believe. But if that would happen, then Trump would be the president in 2020. That's the answer.
During last night's speech, he used the word migration instead of immigration.
Uh-huh.
Did you catch that?
Yeah.
There's a big difference. In as much as migration is more of a periodic thing, birds migrate, things migrate. It's not the same as immigration, where people
it is if you go to a Latin country, they don't call it immigration, they call it migration.
Well, yeah. Well, you use the term faux news. Did you get that from Facebook?
No, why?
Oh, I posted a thing on there where I changed the Fox News logo to faux news.
Oh, I've been saying that for what, 20 years?
We're on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And it's really a vowel movement away from what it does to the news. Faux is too kind. Faux is too French. It's too fabulous. It's too, Paris. It's too Parisian. Now, what they do is if you change the O to a U, that's what they do to the news. That's what I mean when I say a vowel movement away from what they do to the news. These people are in the tank with him so deeply, and I mean it's a sick propaganda machine, which is why we have to solve that problem too. And I've told you what my solution is, and I've had this solution probably since 1996. That's how long I've been thinking about the media. That's how long it has been disturbing to me to watch what corporate has done to the media. Because in 1996, Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Deregulation Act. And that allowed all the mom and pops that would program for their local communities and carry a couple of national shows to be bought out by the Dark Star. It was Clear Channel at the time, but it was the Dark Star, and they offered mom and pops so much money that they just couldn't say no. And they started to program thousands of hours of conservative talk. This was the first efforts in propagandizing the United States, and it worked to a certain extent. We ended up with, a contract on America, and after 40 years of economic expansion and a Democratic Congress, all of a sudden we get flipped over to this Republican racket, and things have never been right. They've never been right. Since then, all the tax breaks go to the top, and the middle class has been hacked away at, and unions have been busted, and healthcare has become more expensive. Pharmaceuticals have gone through the roof. I mean, they did all of this to this country long time ago. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.